Sign it. Do not make me remember the night you destroyed my future 18 years ago. The words hung in the sterile air of the lawyer's office, heavy and suffocating. My father, Jeffrey, did not slide the bill across the mahogany table. He threw it. A crumpled $10 bill skidded across the polished wood and stopped right in front of me. It looked small, pathetic, just like he wanted me to feel. He leaned back in his leather chair, a smug grin twisting his face. He was not just buying my 10% share of the family auto shop. He was erasing me. He needed my signature so he could sell the business, cash out, and finally be rid of the daughter he blamed for every failure in his life. He called it a kindness. I called it an eviction notice. I stared at the money. I could feel the texture of the bill under my fingertips even without touching it. Worn, dirty, cheap. I looked up at him. He was waiting for me to fight, to beg, to cry. He wanted the satisfaction of watching me break. I picked up the pen instead. The plastic felt cool against my skin. I did not say a word. I just let the disrespect hang there, thick and poisonous, filling the room until there was no air left to breathe. Then I uncapped the pen. I signed my name at the bottom of the transfer agreement, pressing down hard enough to leave an indentation on the wood. Jeffrey snatched the paper away before the ink was even dry. He stared at it like he had just won the lottery. A smug, oily smile spreading across his face. Finally, he muttered, tucking the document into his briefcase. You finally did something useful for this family. Now get out. The adults have business to discuss. He thought he had just bullied his secretary daughter into submission. He thought he had stripped me of my only asset for the price of a fast food lunch. He had no idea who was sitting across from him. My name is Abigail. I am 30 years old. To my father, I am a failure. A glorified administrative assistant who answers phones and fetches coffee. To the rest of the world, I am a senior acquisition consultant. I specialize in distressed assets and corporate restructuring. I do not type memos. I decide which companies live and which ones get carved up for parts. I manage portfolios worth $800 million, and I know exactly how to kill a business deal from the inside out. I walked toward the door, my heels clicking on the tile. Every instinct in my body wanted to scream at him, to throw his insults back in his face. But I swallowed the rage. Silence was my weapon. This was the Trojan horse strategy. In the world of high-stakes mergers, you do not attack a corrupt seller while you are still their partner. If I held on to my 10% share when he sold this debt-ridden company, I would be legally liable for the fraud he was about to commit. I would be on the hook for his lies. By selling my shares to him now, for a nominal fee, I was washing my hands clean. I was removing my name from the liability column. When he inevitably lied to the new buyers about the company's debts, he would be doing it alone. He was not just buying my shares. He was buying my silence. And he was buying a one-way ticket to a lawsuit he could not survive. I was not surrendering. I was stepping out of the blast zone so I could detonate the bomb. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the parking lot. The air was cold, biting. It felt good. It felt like clarity. My husband, Donald, was waiting in our 10-year-old sedan, the engine idling. He looked up as I slid into the passenger seat. He did not ask if I was okay. He knew better. He saw the set of my jaw, the cold fire in my eyes. Did he sign? Donald asked quietly. He signed, I said, buckling my seatbelt. He thinks he won. He thinks I am gone. Donald put the car in gear. Then it is done. Not yet, I said, looking back at the office building one last time. He just swallowed the bait. Now we wait for the poison to work. I drove home in silence, the hum of the engine the only sound in the car. But in my mind, I was 18 years away. Back in the dusty, oil-stained garage where everything started. I could smell the engine grease and the stale coffee. I could hear the hum of the machines. I was 12 years old, sweeping the concrete floor because my father said that was the only thing I was good for. My brother, Hunter, was 15. He was playing with the prototype. A delicate, intricate engine model my father had spent 6 months building. It was his masterpiece. His ticket to the big leagues. Do not touch that, I had whispered, leaning on my broom. Shut up, Abigail, Hunter sneered. Dad said I could look at it. He picked it up. His hands were clumsy, careless. I watched in slow motion as it slipped from his fingers. The crash was deafening. Metal shattered against concrete. Gears scattered like shrapnel. Then, the door opened. Jeffrey stood there, his face turning purple with rage. He looked at the broken prototype. He looked at Hunter, his golden boy, standing over the wreckage with wide, terrified eyes. And then he looked at me. He did not yell at Hunter. He did not ask what happened. He crossed the room in 2 strides and slapped me across the face. The force of it knocked me to the ground. My broom clattered beside me. You clumsy, useless girl. he screamed, his spit hitting my cheek. You ruin everything you touch. That was our future. And you destroyed it. I lay there on the cold concrete, my cheek burning, staring up at Hunter. He did not say a word. He did not defend me. He just watched, relieved that the blame had landed somewhere else. That was the moment I learned the rules of this family. Hunter and Jordan were the assets. I was the liability. I was the scapegoat. The punching bag. The one who existed to absorb their failures so they could remain perfect. That slap left a scar that never faded. It was not on my skin. It was on my soul. It taught me that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how good I was, I would always be the one blamed for the wreckage. I pulled into our driveway and killed the engine. Donald reached over and squeezed my hand, pulling me back to the present. The anger was still there, cold and hard in my chest. But now it had a purpose. I looked out the window. Across the street, parked in front of my parents' house, was a brand new, lifted pickup truck. It was massive, shiny, and obnoxious. An $80,000 monument to my father's favoritism. Hunter was leaning against it, laughing with Jordan. They did not know the truck was bought with stolen money. They did not know the company was drowning in debt. They did not know their father was committing fraud just to keep up appearances. And they certainly did not know that the sister they mocked, the sister they thought was a failure, was about to become the repo man. They broke me 18 years ago. They taught me that fairness did not exist. They taught me that the only way to survive was to be smarter, harder, and more ruthless than the people trying to crush you. I watched Hunter pat the hood of his new toy. He looked so confident, so secure. He had no idea the ground was already crumbling beneath his feet. Enjoy it while it lasts, big brother, I whispered. Because the bill is coming due. The knife screeched against the porcelain plate, cutting through the silence of the private dining room. Jeffrey sawed into his $60 ribeye like he was carving up a conquered kingdom. We were at the Gilded Steer, the kind of steakhouse where the lighting is dim, the leather booths are red, and the menu does not list prices. To the big leagues, he announced, raising a glass of scotch that cost more than my first car. Hunter and Jordan raised their glasses, clinking them together with a heavy, self-satisfied thud. They were wearing new suits, ill-fitting, shiny, and expensive. They looked like children playing dress-up in their father's closet. I raised my water glass. I was the ghost at the feast, invited only because Jeffrey needed an audience for his victory lap. 850,000, Jeffrey said, savoring the number like the whiskey on his tongue. Cash. That Steven guy did not even blink. He knows quality when he sees it. He turned his gaze to me. It was not warm. It was the look a farmer gives a mule that has finally pulled the plow to the end of the row. And you, he pointed his steak knife at me. You finally did your job. I told you, Abigail. You sign the paper. The men do the business. Simple. He laughed, a wet, hacking sound. See? Women are for signing. Men are for spending. That is the natural order of things. Hunter snickered, wiping grease from his chin. Thanks for the signature, Abby. Dad says I am going to be vice president of operations for the new holding company. Jordan is getting marketing. I took a sip of water to wash down the bile rising in my throat. Vice president of operations. Hunter could not operate a toaster without supervision. Jordan thought marketing meant posting photos of his truck on Instagram. They were celebrating promotions in a company that did not exist, paid for with money they would never see. So, what is the plan? Jordan asked, leaning forward. After the wire hits on Friday? Jeffrey leaned back, the leather creaking under his weight. We vanish. I have already booked tickets. A long vacation. Maybe Mexico. Maybe Belize. Somewhere the sun shines and the phones do not ring. What about the guys at the shop? Hunter asked. For a second, I thought he showed a flicker of conscience. Old Man Miller and the crew? They are expecting back pay next week. Jeffrey waved his hand dismissively. Let the new owners deal with them. Or let them file for unemployment. I do not care. But the contract says we cover outstanding payroll, Hunter mumbled. The contract says whatever they think it says. Jeffrey snapped. Those workers leached off me for years. They did not work hard enough to save the business. So why should I save them? I fed them for decades. Now it is my turn to eat. I gripped the stem of my glass until my knuckles turned white. Old Man Miller used to sneak me sandwiches when Jeffrey forgot to leave lunch money. The mechanics had taught me how to change a tire, how to weld, how to stand up straight. They were the ones who built this business. And Jeffrey was planning to leave them starving while he sipped margaritas on a beach. That was the final seal. If I had any lingering doubt, any tiny voice whispering that he was still my father, it died right there between the appetizer and the main course. This was not just about me anymore. It was about Miller. It was about the receptionist who bought my prom dress. It was about every person he had used and discarded. You are right, Dad, I said, my voice steady, cutting through the air like a razor. You deserve everything that is coming to you. He grinned, missing the double meaning entirely. Damn right I do. I watched him take a bite of steak, blood running down his chin. He looked like a king. He did not know he was already a prisoner. The conference room on the 42nd floor was a glass cage floating above the city. It smelled of lemon polish and aggressive air conditioning. Stephen sat across from me, a thick file folder between us. To the outside world, Stephen was the CEO of Apex Holdings, the firm buying my father's business. To me, he was the guy I hired 3 years ago because he had a killer instinct and a poker face that could freeze water. He cooked the books, Stephen said, tapping the file. Badly. I opened the folder. The numbers screamed fraud. Jeffrey had hidden $150,000 in federal tax liens and unpaid vendor invoices. He had inflated the asset value of the machinery by 40%. In a normal deal, this would be the moment we walked away. But this was not a normal deal. This was an execution. He thinks we will not check, I said, tracing the line item where he had buried the payroll debt. If we run standard due diligence, the lawyers will flag this in 24 hours, Stephen warned. The deal dies. Then we do not run it, I said. Stephen raised an eyebrow. You want to buy a liability? I want to hand him a shovel, I corrected. We waive the 30-day due diligence period. We tell him we are in a rush to close before the quarter ends. We offer him speed in exchange for security. I pulled a single document from my briefcase. The personal indemnity agreement. It was a standard clause in high-risk acquisitions, but to a desperate man, it looked like fine print. It stated that if the seller misrepresented any financial data, the corporate veil was pierced. The seller would be personally liable for damages up to 3 times the value of the fraud, and they would forfeit all personal assets used to secure the guarantee. He signs this, I said, sliding it over to Stephen. And he hands me the keys to his life. The door opened. Jeffrey walked in, flanked by Hunter and Jordan. They were loud, taking up space, filling the sterile room with the smell of cheap cologne and arrogance. They did not look at me. I was sitting in the back corner, typing on my laptop, dressed in a plain gray suit. To them, I was just the note-taker, the help. Gentlemen, Stephen stood up, extending a hand. Let us make some money. Jeffrey sat at the head of the table, leaning back, expanding. I like a man who gets to the point. You have the check? Better, Stephen said. I have a fast track. My investors want this closed by Friday. I am willing to waive the inspections and the audit period. We transfer the funds in 48 hours. Hunter high-fived Jordan under the table. Jeffrey's eyes lit up. He saw the finish line. He did not see the tripwire. However, Stephen continued, his voice smooth as silk. Since we are skipping the audit, I need a personal guarantee that the books are clean. Standard procedure. Just sign here. Stating there are no undisclosed debts. Jeffrey laughed. It was a nervous, greedy sound. Clean as a whistle. You have my word. I need your signature, Stephen said, pushing the indemnity agreement forward. Jeffrey grabbed the pen. He did not read it. He did not check the clauses. He was too busy spending the money in his head. He scribbled his name with a flourish. And we need a notary. Stephen gestured to the man sitting quietly next to me. Donald stood up. My husband. The man Jeffrey had called unambitious because he preferred stable work over gambling on risky ventures. Jeffrey barely glanced at him. To my father, Donald was just another piece of furniture. He did not realize that the man stamping the document was the witness who would ensure this contract held up in federal court. Donald set his seal on the paper. Thump. The sound echoed in the room like a gavel drop. Jeffrey stood up, pumping Stephen's hand. Pleasure doing business with you. The pleasure is mine, Stephen said, not smiling. I watched them leave, high-fiving in the hallway. They were celebrating a victory that was actually a funeral. Jeffrey had just bet his house, his truck, and his freedom on a lie he told to the wrong people. Donald looked at me across the room. He closed his notary book. He did not even say hello, Donald said softly. He will not be saying much of anything by Friday, I replied, closing my laptop. The ink is dry. The phone rang at 11 in the evening the night before the closing. I knew who it was before I even looked at the screen. Jeffrey could not resist a victory lap. I sat on my balcony, a glass of wine in my hand, watching the city lights of Portland below. I swiped answer and tapped the record button on my other screen. Hello, Dad, I said. You awake? His voice was thick, slurred. He was celebrating early. I bet you are awake. Probably wondering how you are going to pay rent with that $10 bill I gave you. He laughed, a wet, rasping sound. I could hear the clink of a bottle against a glass in the background. I am doing just fine, I said. Did the deal go through? It's done, he crowed. We sign tomorrow morning $850,000. Can you believe it? Those city suits are idiots. Rushed the close. Didn't even look at the books. Sounds lucky, I said, baiting him. You sure everything's clean? If they find the tax liens later, they won't. He cut in, dropping to a whisper. That's the beauty of it. I sold them a sinking ship, Abigail. Rotten to the core. Rusted inventory, empty pension fund, and the tax man at the door. By the time they realize, I'll be on a beach in Cabo. I watched the recorder climb. 48, 49. So you're admitting you deceived them? I asked. I didn't lie, he scoffed. I just didn't volunteer what they were too stupid to ask. That's business. But you wouldn't know. You're just a secretary. Right, I said. Just a secretary. Sucks to be you, he laughed. Hunter's getting a new truck. Jordan's shopping condos. And you? You got what you deserve, $10 and a kick in the ass. Goodbye, Jeffrey, I said, and hung up. I saved the audio. Backed it up to 3 different clouds. In fraud cases, intent is the hardest thing to prove until someone admits on tape they knew the asset was a sinking ship while signing warranties that it was solvent. Premeditated. Malicious. Admissible. But the recording was only one trap. Jeffrey thought he was selling to a stranger named Stephen. He didn't know Stephen was a front, and he didn't know what I'd done 3 days earlier. I went to the bank holding his commercial mortgage and personal loans and bought his distressed debt every note. Banks love dumping bad loans. I used my liquidity and bought them for pennies. Technically, I was already the bank. I owned the mortgage on his house, the liens on his equipment, the debt on the trucks he let Hunter drive. He wasn't negotiating with a buyer, he was negotiating with his executioner. He thought tomorrow was payday. He didn't realize foreclosure had already started. The money he expected wasn't a payout, it was a mirage. The champagne bottle was sweating in the silver bucket. Hunter and Jordan vibrated with excitement, tapping their new designer watches on the glass table. Jeffrey sat back, smug. What's the holdup? Jeffrey snapped. The wire should have hit 5 minutes ago. Stephen glanced up, bored. Escrow flagged a problem. What problem? Jeffrey jumped up. I signed. I handed over the keys. Where's my money? The audit found a discrepancy, Stephen said, sliding a single page across the table. $150,000 in undisclosed tax liens and unpaid payroll. You certified the company was debt-free. That's a mistake, Jeffrey yelled, turning purple. My accountant messed up. I'll fire him. Release the funds. We can't, Stephen said calmly. The contract is void. Unless what? Unless the chairman approves an override. Then get him. Jeffrey slammed his fist down. Call him. Bring him in. You don't need a phone, a voice said from the doorway. The heavy oak door swung open. I walked in not in my gray office suit, but in a tailored black dress and stilettos that clicked across the hardwood. I went straight to the head of the table, pulled out the chairman's chair, and sat. I set my briefcase down and snapped the locks open sharp as a gunshot. Silence. Jeffrey blinked. Abigail? What the hell are you doing here? You come to clean the floors? Hunter snickered. Lost your way to the break room, Abby? I'm not here to clean, I said, steady. I'm here to collect. Jeffrey laughed, thin and shaky. You're a secretary. Get out before I have security throw you out. Stephen's voice turned icy. Mr. Hayes, meet the managing partner of Helios Capital, the entity acquiring your assets. This is Abigail. The blood drained from Jeffrey's face. He stared between us, mouth opening and closing. That's impossible, he whispered. You don't have money. I have plenty, I said. And I have the personal indemnity agreement you signed 3 days ago. Donald notarized it while you were too busy ignoring him to notice. I slid the document forward. His signature glared at him. You lied on a federal disclosure form, I said. You claimed the company was solvent while knowing it was sinking. I have your recorded confession from last night. That triggers the fraud clause punitive damages. 300%. You trapped me, he choked. I audited you, I corrected. And you failed. For years, he'd seemed like a giant, loud, terrifying, filling every room. But his power was never character. It was cash. Money bought silence, loyalty, fear. He thought net worth was self-worth. Now, as the numbers evaporated, so did the man. He shrank into his chair, arrogance draining out, leaving a frightened old bully with an empty wallet. Hunter stammered, panicking. You can't do this, what about my truck? I put a deposit down. The truck is gone, I said, not even looking at him. And so is the house. I turned back to Jeffrey. I didn't just buy the company. I bought the banknotes. I own your mortgage, your liens, your loans, and after your fraud admission, I'm calling them due immediately. I have nowhere to go, Jeffrey whispered. I know, I said. Maybe you can sleep in the prototype room. Plenty of floor space. I stood. Stephen, handle the foreclosure. I have a lunch reservation. Repo men were already waiting outside. Hunter screamed as his truck was hooked and dragged away. Jordan tried to run, security stopped him at the gate. Jeffrey didn't run. He just sat until security escorted him out, and when he tried to take the company laptop, Stephen gently removed it from his hands. Company property, Stephen said. Belongs to the new owner. The fallout was total. Escrow froze the funds under fraud investigation, but Jeffrey had already spent the money in his head and on credit. Condo deposits, first-class tickets, new furniture for a life he'd never live. When the wire didn't hit, checks bounced like rubber balls. 3 days later, the foreclosure notice arrived. Because I owned the mortgage, I filed a lis pendens freezing any sale, refinance, or equity move. He was trapped in a house he couldn't afford, with debts he couldn't pay, and no job to save him. I didn't let him starve. I gave him 30 days. He ended up in a one-bedroom above a laundromat on the bad side of town. Small, loud, smelling of detergent. Perfect. The next Monday, I walked back into the auto shop. Grease and coffee in the air, same as 18 years ago. The workers looked terrified, expecting layoffs. Gather round, I said, standing on a crate. My father is gone. Hunter and Jordan are gone. The team that drove this place into the ground is gone. A murmur rippled through them. I'm the new owner, I said. And my first act is to pay every cent of back wages plus 10% interest. Miller looked up, stunned. Second, I said. I'm promoting Miller to shop foreman. He knows this place better than anyone. Miller cried. Men clapped him on the back, first smiles I'd seen in years. I walked to the stained patch of concrete where I used to stand with a broom, where Jeffrey slapped me. I stood there until the memory lost its power. The shame was gone. The girl who thought she was worthless had grown into the woman who owned the building. I stepped into the sunlight. Donald waited in the sedan, engine idling. Ready to go home? He asked. Yeah, I said, buckling in. Let's go home. They told me I was a bad investment. A liability. I just proved I was the one auditing the books the whole time. If you've ever had to buy your own freedom, subscribe.